So hello everyone. Welcome to our Smart City talk today. And for today, we are honored to have the Dr. Jeffrey D. Cox to give us a talk. Jeffrey is the founder and the chairman of the Autonomous Institute, which is a government, industry, academia, and public alliance. The alliance aims to create the policies, industry jobs, and community benefits of the digital edge of the infrastructure and autonomous systems. Jeffrey holds a deep knowledge of the technology industry and a lifelong position for the innovations. So we're very fortunate to have him to us here to give us a talk. And his talk's titles is for today is intelligent infrastructure will enable industry 4.0. It seems very interesting. So Jeffrey, do you want to get started?
Yes, I first of all, I appreciate being invited to this talk. I think the Good Systems initiative is one that's really vital for society in general. So I'm glad we're having an opportunity to talk about intelligent infrastructure. I think this could be collaborative, right? So our goal, or my goal, is to basically maybe go through 10 minutes of slides, but then get into questions. Is that a form that you guys often do at these meetings? Okay.
Yeah, so we intended for this to be a short, more discussion, formal presentation, but more of the discussion.
Perfect.
We also, by the way, we also record all the sessions and the data we can post into our website. So is that okay with you?
Yes, it is. Yes, that's good.
Yeah. So we have more views for each of the presentation to be posted online. There's already people requesting me to record in these sessions.
That's great.
Because they cannot make it.
No, that's a good idea. Yeah, because you guys are busy at the university, so it's good to have these recorded.
Yeah, it's hard to have a time everyone has it.
It's great.
Sure.
Well, wonderful. So I'll jump into the I guess I'll need screen sharing.
Yeah, I think you can try it now.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect. So slides coming up?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'll lay out kind of what we are when we talk about intelligent infrastructure and that basically empowers Industry 4.0. We'll hit a couple topics, and that should lead into a pretty good discussion on the latter half. So when we talk about intelligent infrastructure, we usually talk about two other components, which won't really be highlighted today, which is the digital twin and the data exchange. But all three of these are vital, and they're all extremely important for intelligent city applications to become successful. Setting context on the Autonomy Institute. The Autonomy Institute is a 501c3. So we're seen as the catalyst between government and industry to basically accelerate the path of commerce for intelligent and automated systems, as well as the infrastructure that drives that the deployment capabilities. And as we talked about, three foundations. We'll be talking extensively about edge infrastructure today, but we also see the digital twin as being the main bridge between the digital and the physical world that we're looking to deploy in. When we talk about infrastructure, it's good to kind of set context. Infrastructure is usually very boring, and this is probably not anything different. But if you look at all the fundamental changes or main industries that we've been able to deploy worldwide, it all depended on some infrastructure being laid down for it to be commercially viable and to impact society at scale. That includes everything from the rail, electricity, automotive, all the way up to even the internet, where we kind of take for granted the fact that we even are able to do this Zoom meeting is dependent heavily on fiber, radio towers, data centers, and a tremendous amount of ISP technology. When we talk about intelligent cities and automated systems like cars, trucks, drones delivering things to people's homes, it also is going to be dependent on a new infrastructure that does not really exist at scale today. And that is infrastructure that provides resilience and risk mitigation, as well as the actual servicing of how this technology gets deployed. So if you think about, I think all of us, or most people, especially in the technology field at universities, know that autonomous cars and trucks and such leverage a tremendous amount of horsepower and a lot of sensors to keep themselves safe and to mitigate any type of risk in those systems being deployed. Well, they're have done an exceptional job from the vehicle standpoint, but now the same type of technology has to be deployed within the city to actually provide the orchestration layer, what you would say the equivalent to what the FAA does with the aviation industry. And the reason we talk about intelligent infrastructure is because a lot of sensors have to be deployed. This is lists a couple that most people should be aware of. You know, there's things like 4G, 5G, and in some places 6G networks being deployed. You have C-V2X, which allows robust communication. And you have things like radars and LiDARs and other services that basically mitigate the risk for like pedestrians, you know, within cities. And all those technologies have a limitation on their ability to project as far as the line of sight, or the propagation of signal is much smaller than the current technologies. If you think about the macro towers we have for our cell service, for our phones and how we communicate with cars, the next layer is going to be far more densified within the city. And that's what led to the Autonomy Institute working with cities back in 2018 and 19, realizing that there has to be a new approach to getting that infrastructure within cities, primarily because the cities were already being inundated with technologies like, at that time, 4G and 5G networks. And if you think about, there's already a lot of devices being strapped, bolted, and attached to wood poles and utility poles and, you know, traffic poles, but many other devices have to be deployed as well. Things like on the transportation side, you know, there's a lot of value in having LiDAR and radars and assured position, navigation, timing. There's other devices that are coming to provide a more resilient grid, microgrid technology. And of course, there's a lot of interest to get computing on the sidewalk to allow a lot of data to be processed at the edge versus having to go back to a cloud. And what this was identified as a problem that the Autonomy Institute, you know, looked to solve, because if we did not address this, you know, glaring problem, the same issues that occurred in the 1920s and 30s could occur. And these are real pictures of the cities with all the explosion of the electric grid and the telecommunications grid. And what happened is it became very unwieldy and very hard to manage. And of course, it became a tremendous amount of blight to the cities back at that time. So what emerged out of that, and working with dozens of industry partners, is we said, well, how would this be solved? Like, how could we solve the deployment of technology today, but more importantly, prepare for the upgrade of that technology and the additional, you know, sensors that would be deployed well into the future? And what was developed is one of the first forms of intelligent infrastructure called the PIN, Public Infrastructure Network node, that supports all types of devices. So it's, you could think of this as a physical structure, like a condo, but rather than a condo for people, it's a condo for electronics and compute and sensors. And if you think about long-term, this allows sensors, small cell, intelligent transportation, VRAD gear, and even the microgrid technology to be incorporated and upgraded more effectively over time. And the thing the Autonomy Institute was mainly focused on, how can we get more intelligence and how can we allow activation of autonomous cars and trucks and rovers delivering groceries to people's homes, but it also addresses fundamental problems that cities have, which is how can they get broadband to all, not just select neighborhoods having 5G. How can they provide technologies that optimize basic today's mobility and things like health and safety and resilient grids? So in solving the problem for the advanced sensors for the future is also solving the problem for today's challenges of how do we get to Vision Zero? How do we make sure that everybody has resilient connectivity within the city or within the community? Other benefits we highlight is intelligent infrastructure. By having these devices and technologies, we are able to accelerate the path to Vision Zero, get broadband everywhere, and really start to activate all these ways to make mobility more efficient, thus reducing emissions across a city or highway. But I think I'll stop. Just kind of showing the one thing I'll point out is, once again, it's not just about connected and autonomous systems. Pretty much all the city services that become more intelligent over time, and all these additional services that can be provided to the community, will rely heavily on this new intelligent infrastructure adopted within the city. So leaving plenty of time for conversation, I'm going to stop there to take questions or jump to other slides to answer questions. Any feedback from the group?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. If anyone else has a question, I guess I thought the presentation was really interesting. I guess one thing that I'm wondering about is this. It seems like lots and lots of different types of infrastructure. It seems almost a little overwhelming with the number of things that might need to be added or changed. I guess one of the things that I'm quite interested in is like, in terms of working with governments, like what level of government is probably the best to focus on to kind of add or change this infrastructure? Is it more so the city level, state level, or like the federal level?
Depending on where you're deploying the infrastructure, it could be all three of those, or it could be a developer that's doing a neighborhood. So we've, over the last 3 years, worked extensively with city, state, and federal. We have weekly calls with the federal government, because once they kind of were enlightened with how infrastructure could be deployed more effectively, more securely, and then basically plan for the future, they embraced it and wanted to find out how could we accelerate the path to getting it out. And I'd say that right now is the challenging part. Right now, many companies want to strap, bolt, or attach something to a city, and that is what has become unwieldy and very difficult to manage. By having the intelligent infrastructure, you greatly simplify the process, and you allow private infrastructure investors to underwrite $100, $200 million deployments within a city, very similar to what the interstate highways did starting back in 1956. So this will happen. Our goal in working with the federal agencies now is by 2023 is pass an intelligent infrastructure bill for all 50 state build out to allow us to catch up to other nation states that are well ahead of us on deploying this type of technology.
So I guess I have a two question on the two aspects. So one is I think when you're talking about intelligent infrastructure, it seems like policy-wise there needs some kind of the policy to coordinate. Like from our experience working with the city, it seems like this department may getting some smart devices and that department getting some smart devices, but it's rarely they can really share information or exchange information. But if we're talking about really like a revolution, like having a overarching, like to utilize and benefit to the maximum, we do need be able some kind of coordination between how the data can be flowed, so we can make sure that can be used there. So my question related to that is on the two part is one, I think that there needs something to be done in the policy side and to be able to dealing with the data sharing protection issues. On the other hand, is I wonder like what's your view on what's the technology are needed and in order to help to solving those practical challenges.
Well, very, very good questions. And I'd say that you are right. Like City of Austin, as an example, has over 150 people involved with this discussion about PINs within the city. So cities have a lot of departments that have to be involved, you know, urban planning, the power, public works, you know, but you also have the same type of problem at the federal level. So this kind of helps you understand that when you're talking about this intelligent infrastructure going in, you're not just dealing with transportation, you're dealing with spectrum. So you're basically dealing with the two federal agencies that are responsible for the electromagnetic spectrum that is deployed within a city or down a highway. So the FCC and the NTIA. You also are dealing with on a national security side, and how do you provide more sovereign communities. So you're dealing with homeland security. And then what's happening very clearly is the electrification of mobility is also pulling in the energy grid in the DOE and wanting to look at what technology can offload a lot of the processing and to basically support the microgrid technology within the city. And of course, on the operation side, you have not just DOT, but you have aviation, you have NASA, and you have even NOAA that basically has applications that would be taking advantage of the infrastructure. So as far as policy, though, there's no necessarily federal legislation that has to go through for this to start happening. In fact, if you walk around Austin, you'll probably start seeing these cabinets on the side of the road. There's several cities in the US that have already started to deploy. And this is an example of some of them. So these systems are already popping up in other cities and other communities. But the goal is to make these more universal and be standards based, because right now there's a lot of different options. And unfortunately, it's requiring the device manufacturers to have to re-engineer each time, versus if you guys are familiar with like what a 19-inch rack in a data center, if you design a server or a network device or a storage device, and to that specification, you could be deployed within a data center. And that's what we're attempting to do for what we have done with many of the devices already. But any new device that will be implemented within the city as well.
Yep.
Yeah. And if you drive around town, here's some examples of just try to get an idea. So these don't, of course, the pins are not deployed, but if you're on Lavaca and 15th, you'll see things like silver boxes, which every single controlled intersection has a silver box at one of the intersections, because that is where all of the control systems exist. What is going to be done is the pin will be replacing over time devices that already exist, but then also allow other devices to be deployed without it all being separate and attached to the point that we just have blight everywhere.
Yeah, by the way, I'm working at the Texas Advanced Computing Center, so I'm fully aware of what you're saying about the data center specification part, right? So for our latest deployment, and we have to considering how high the cabinet has been growing now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, and then in that case, you guys have even installed those immersion cooling systems, and that's kind of changed things in a data center, but a little more challenging.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So from the technology aspect, do you think like there's the existing standard for data for exchange are are enough, or there's some more need to be done on those aspects to help
Well,
to be more
yeah.
interoperable?
So on the data exchange specifically, there is going to have to be new policy. So I think a lot of this, the physical hardware can be deployed today with not necessarily having any policy change. But now when you talk about a lot of data being captured on the sidewalk, that should stay sovereign to the city, that's going to be part of the public-private partnership. So what's going to happen is a new entity is going to be established between the private industry and the public industry, and the community will determine how that data is managed and treated. So I think the data exchange at a city is going to become a battleground, I think, between public and private, because I think a lot of us are concerned about how much data goes into the cloud and how it's actually manipulated, where this data is going to be like a single pin that's supporting the autonomous and connected vehicles could be processing over a petabyte of data. Well, we don't want that petabyte of data per intersection going somewhere outside of the city, because it's only supposed to be used in the city, only supposed to be enhancing the community that it's serving.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's really an interesting issue from both policy and the technology perspective. So I'm working on the project with city on the analyzing the traffic cameras in the intersection, and to help to automate some of the traffic statistic estimation or how people using the roads, sort of things. So when you think about those data, and they seems to be a public data because that's a public domain, public fields, and then but when you really start to recording and aggregating them, the line, the boundaries became blurry, and how much is you can release or you should release versus how much you really need to be protect or doing that. So I guess that's going to be a lot of more challenging when we have more and more data being stored and kept, and who exactly has the right to access and who should have the right access. That became two separate questions.
We would love to engage with that discussion, because that's the one that's at the national stage is top of mind for everybody, because it's kind of like you mentioned cameras. Well, the cameras that are going to be deployed on a lot of these are going to be far higher fidelity. So what people are wanting to assure is that anything that's person identifiable is never recorded. So you have to, at the point where the camera is deployed, all that processing is being done there. So you're actually never able to record a person's face or license plates and things like that. But those are the challenging discussions. But it's also why a P3, a public-private partnership, is required, because if it just goes to the city falls to all the open records requests, and they really don't have any option. And that's why you'll, I'm sure you know, the city, in a lot of the cameras, they don't record at all. Or if they do record, they only record 7 days, and it's kind of a rolling off.
Yeah.
And where a public-private partnership can actually exclude access to data and actually create an official data exchange, where that data can be sold and creates economic value back to the community. Think about vehicle miles traveled as an example. As we phase out more and more gas going into electric, there has to be another system that actually tracks how do we pay for the roads and the sidewalks over time.
Yeah. Yeah, to clarify, when I say record, I don't really mean to record the video forever. It's really like
agreed.
Type of the streaming processing, but even for process the result, because right now the algorithm, the AI can do a lot of more, right? So I don't know if you heard, but in China, they catch more fugitive during the concert because they have those automatic face recognition and just looking through the crowd, and you can connecting to those database, right? So, but that's just an example to say, like, even we do the processing, it also depends on how much you're really doing, right? So,
well, and that's the thing that scares a lot of people, because if you're having all that data captured, and it's not part of a public-private partnership that's somehow managed by the community, it could be it could get out of hand. So I think it's really key. And what's good though is if that data is being processed at the pin, well, you can really limit the individual's concerns, because it's not just being sucked back into some big cloud somewhere.
I see. So for the public-private partnership you were mentioning, do you have any example, the city of Austin currently working with a certain entities on that, or is something to be established yet?
It's something that we've been working to establish. So we've been working with the city on that, working with the city managers and all the different departments. And there's investors, private investors, that have come in to say, there could be potentially $150 million of private infrastructure investors coming in to deploy the pins to then support all these additional services. But even though a company could just come in and deploy pins independent of the city, because of the current laws that the FCC has supports it, but it doesn't really meet the needs that really have to be there for the community, because you want to be able to service not just the devices coming in, but all the new services that will be supplied to them. And that's why we believe the P3 with the city is so vital.
Okay.
And yeah, but we've been working on that for well over a year to work on what would that P3 look like? What would the special purpose vehicle that would get stood up look like?
Okay. So apologize, I was a little bit late to the talk today. I had a previous meetings, but I do want to give you a little background about the talk itself. Was funded in part with a UT project called the Good System. So the Good System, the overall goal is actually aligned very much with what the a lot of problem you were just mentioning there. So it would be great, like in that public-private part, and we may also have academia as part of things to help to guide them about like technology, or help to do some more advanced application there.
We would welcome the collaboration, and just to let you know that we've reached out to Jaffe several times. We believe the innovation and really the entire path you're on is very aligned with the Autonomy Institute. And if also the Autonomy Institute was originally being stood up in collaboration. We had a MOU with the University of Texas back in 2018 to stand up the Autonomy Institute. But then through various reasons, we had to pursue it, stand it up independently. But we believe universities, specifically the Good Systems, is a very strategic partner.
Yeah, we definitely should follow up more on this.
That'd be great.
I will reach out to current lead for the Good System part.
Great.
And to see if we can start in other things, because independently we also have the local agreement with the city of Austin and trying to pushing more of the collaboration between UT and the city of Austin. I think a lot of the goals are really aligned very, very well, and there are going to be a lot of mutual benefits to having more of theirs. Yeah,
and University of Texas has already a very strong relationship and agreement already in place with the city of Austin as well, which makes it very advantageous.
Okay.
Great.
Great. So I think we are right on the time here. So is there any more question from audience? Okay. Yeah, I do want to thank you very much for Dr. Jeffrey Cox for this talk. It's very interesting, and I think it's very important talk, and for future development as well. So
great.
We will have the recording posted on our website, smartcity.tech.utexas.edu, and from there you can also see all our past recording and on the future talk announcement as well.
Great.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone. And
I appreciate the time. Thank you. Have a great day.
Have a good weekend.